This is part 2 of sulfur and your digestive system, and I'm going to break this down. I'm basically reading to you from one of the pieces that I wrote that sort of goes through the step by step. So there's a lot of things to go through. So part 2, we're going to talk about the parts of your digestive system, and then we'll talk a little bit about your microbiome before we go into some details about sulfur itself. So your digestive system is a group of organs that food travels through so that you can extract the nutrients from it. And on its journey, the food is broken down, which is the word for digestion. Digestion means breaking down the food. And then the nutrients are absorbed into your bloodstream, and then the waste exits at the end. So your GI tract includes your mouth, your throat, your esophagus, your stomach, your small intestine, 25 feet long, and your large intestine, about 3 feet long, rectum and anus. This system is complicated, as you can well imagine. So a lot could go wrong, and the largest places where things could go wrong are the large and small intestine in terms of functional medicine. You can have microbiome imbalances in both the large and in the small intestine, or in both of those areas. So right after the stomach churns up your food and mixes it with hydrochloric acid to kill the germs and activate digestion, the food is sent into the small intestine. And the small intestine is a place where the food gets broken down into the smallest building blocks by your digestive enzymes, which are released from the pancreas. And then the very final stage of digestive enzyme release is from the cells of the small intestine. So those cells have to be healthy to do their job. Most of the nutrients are absorbed in that 25-foot long tube of the small intestine. Is all coiled around in the middle of your stomach area. After that, the waste and insoluble fibers move into the large intestine. There's a few bacteria in the small intestine, but there's much more in the large intestine. And small bacterial overgrowth, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO, and small intestinal fungal overgrowth, or SIFO, occur when too many bacteria or too many yeasts are growing in the wrong place in the small intestine. And that can lead to symptoms in the small intestine. Those are usually fermentation symptoms, meaning gassy. They produce gas when they eat your foods. They ferment, right? So our bodies, we can't make gas except in our lungs. In our digestive system, we're not making the gas. It's always part of the microbiome that's making the gas. Too many of the wrong bacteria, too many yeast, they're going to get your food before you do, and they're going to make the gas. So when that happens in the small intestine, you're going to have upper GI symptoms. You're going to have burping and upper GI bloating, gas, maybe some heartburn because it's putting pressure that goes up in your system. In your large intestine is the part where the fiber moves through. Remember, all of the food nutrients have been extracted for the most part, and now we've got insoluble fiber moving through the large intestine. That fiber is important because it's feeding the bacteria in the large intestine and helping that bacteria to ferment. It's actually a fermentation system, and that fermentation then in turn produces food for your body. So there's a little factory there inside of you using bacteria to produce some of the nutrients that your large intestinal cells need to stay healthy, like butyrate. So we're talking about the food going through the large intestine. The large intestine is about 3 feet long. Small intestine, 25 feet. Large intestine, 3 feet. Once you get to the large intestine, which is a completely separate ecosystem, there's a valve that divides them. They have a different cellular composition. They have a different function. They have a different microbiome. So there's a small amount of bacteria in a healthy small intestine. There's a large amount of bacteria in a healthy large intestine, but both of them have to have the right ratios. So once it reaches your food reaches the large intestine, you're going to get water and salt absorbed back into your body, and that's why people, if they don't have enough water, are going to be more constipated because their stool is harder. If you have an imbalance in the large intestine, we like to call it dysbiosis, meaning there's a problem or a problem with the makeup of the microbiome, dysbiosis, and that could be bacteria or yeast overgrowth. Food intolerance also has a big impact on the small and the large intestine, but we primarily find leaky gut aspects in the small intestine. And using sulfur may be particularly helpful for small intestinal microbiome balance, for improving SIBO, for improving SIFO. It can also improve your gut lining, gut motility, bacterial overgrowth. Sulfur is a natural biofilm buster in the large intestine, and it also stops something called quorum sensing, so it stops them from the wrong bacteria from grouping together and trying to power up and overpower your immune system. Sulfur is also a powerful antifungal that sends the yeasts out of your body. But before we jump into the potential gut health benefits of sulfur, let's talk a little bit more about your microbiome balance. Your gut is the home to trillions of microbes, bacteria, yeast, viruses, and some others. There are more bacterial cells in your body than human cells. There's more bacterial cells in your body than human cells. There's more bacterial DNA in your body than human DNA. Interesting to think about. The Human Microbiome Project published a study in Nature in 2019 that found that the average gut is home to up to 1,000 different bacterial species. These are beneficial or commensal species, but only if they grow in the correct proportions and the correct amounts. Having potentially harmful bacteria in your gut is normal, as long as they don't overgrow. Thus, it's important to have a healthy balance between beneficial and potentially harmful microbes. If you have too many bad bacteria and too few good ones, again, we call that dysbiosis in the large intestine or SIBO in the small intestine, your gut microbiome will be off balance and you can develop problems. Dysbiosis can lead to chronic inflammation, leaky gut, gasiness, bloating, abdominal pain, and other systemic inflammatory symptoms and conditions. So taking care of your gut microbiome is clearly important. Most of us have heard of the importance of probiotics and prebiotics, but there's one nutrient that we're not talking about enough, in my opinion, and that's sulfur, because it could be the key to a lot of people's microbiome imbalance. We're talking about sulfur. So I just want to also add on this one little bit about probiotics. Now, if you look at a bottle of any typical probiotics, you'll see lactobacillus, you'll see bifidobacter, maybe Akkermansia is a new one that's coming out, or is in a couple formulas. Sometimes they'll throw some yeast in there, like Saccharomyces boulardii, and there's a couple other. But if we're talking about 1,000 different species, and then we're talking about 4 or 5 that are able to be put into a pill, you can see how limited the probiotic treatment is. So probiotics are, they're useful, but they're not everything. So what we're going to do next is we're going to go on to talk about sulfur specifically.